We've got an update on Leafs defenseman Chris Tanev, and should Toronto go after Seth Jones? We'll discuss that and more on today's edition of the Locked On at Leafs podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team every day.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome into the Locked On at Leafs podcast, a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast hosted by myself, Mike DiStefano, and my co-host, Dave Morassutti. What's going on, pal? How we doing on a Thursday?
Doing pretty good. Got my voting done for those in Ontario with the election.
Yes. After the podcast, that's where I'm heading to.
Yeah, important. Go and vote. Make sure you do your part.
Yes, absolutely. I am a big believer in voting. I don't care who you vote for. Just go out and vote. This just one of the rights you have as a Canadian to be able to do so. So take full advantage of it. All right, Dave, we got a bunch of stuff that we want to get into today. We got some updates in practice. Yesterday was very light practice out on the ice. So, kind of raised some eyebrows with the amount of star power that was not on the ice for the full practice session, but we've got some updates. It's not as bad as it looked, and we now somewhat know what's going on with Chris Tanev, who left the game the other night to injury, and what his status might be moving forward. And look, Seth Jones is a name that's really interesting. He's now hit the trade market. He's up near the tippy top of most of the trade boards, and could he potentially be on the radar of the Toronto Maple Leafs? We'll discuss the fit and more later on in the show. But why don't we go ahead and let's get into what we know from the practice from Wednesday. So it was a big maintenance day for the Maple Leafs, essentially, and we saw Matthews not in the game, Marner not at practice, OEL, McCabe, Riley, Tanev, Nylander, all missing practice on Monday.
On Wednesday.
Or on Wednesday, sorry. The first five of the group that I mentioned, Matthews, Marner, OEL, McCabe, Riley, all considered maintenance days. Nylander, kind of a maintenance day, although Berube did say that he did get banged up in the third period in the game against Boston. Chris Tanev, though, he is injured, and what do we know? What's the latest with the Tanev situation, Dave?
Basically that it's day to day. He will not play against the Rangers on Friday, so Philip Myers will check in for Tanev, and I would likely assume that if he's not playing Friday, the chances of him playing on Sunday. Well, obviously, Berube will probably give a bit more of an update, but I doubt he would play on Sunday as well. So, yeah, day-to-day, which in Leafs land could mean a couple weeks.
Yeah, who knows? Who knows what that means?
But it's not as bad as originally thought, because I think somebody was reporting that it could be a shoulder injury. So shoulders are tricky, right? So it could have been a lot more serious, but apparently it's not as bad as originally thought.
Yeah, well, that's best case scenario for the Maple Leafs, obviously, because we know how important he is to this lineup. Like, he is, he's done wonders for this blue line, and he's out there killing penalties. He's playing over 20 minutes a night. He's, shutting down opposition's top lines, killing plays, blocking shots. He does it all, and he plays a hard physical game. It'll just be the second game that he's missed this year, which I think is a positive to this point.
Mm-hmm.
There was a lot of concerns about his injury history prior to landing here in Toronto, but he's been relatively healthy considering the way he plays, and it's only going to be game 2. Hopefully there's not much more to miss after this. Like you said, currently day to day, it's considered a shoulder injury, and hopefully he can get back on the ice at some point in the near future and get back into the lineup. Well, I am curious though, Dave, with this Chris Tanev injury, and it looks like Phil Myers is going to slot in for him on Friday against the New York Rangers. Do you think this possibly gets the Leafs a little bit more motivated to make a move on the back end. Like you look at this team, you know they want to make a move of some kind to bring in a depth defenseman or possibly, someone a little bigger to fit into the top four. Could an injury like this maybe speed up their clock a little bit?
I think the big thing here is, I understand that you don't want to overreact with an injury, but it just underscores when this team loses one defenseman, the rest of the pairings don't look the same, right? Look at how much Jake McCabe missed, right? And how they did not look the same with Jake McCabe out of the lineup, right? Tanev, now you're going to see what this team looks like without Tanev in the lineup. So this tests the team's depth. Like, they got guys that can play on the third pair, sure, in sheltered minutes. We all know that Tanev is out. That means one of Myers, Benoit, or Timmins now have to get elevated, and it's not the same, right? So you want to be able to have that depth going into the playoffs, right? You want to be able to say that you're a little more comfortable if one of your guys is out, that somebody else can step up and provide your team with a little, there isn't a massive drop off, right, when you lose somebody. And also, we're also talking about just upgrading the current group as it stands.
No, 100%. 100%. Sorry about that. My bike's being a little finicky right now, but 100% there, Dave. Like that's what the team, they not only do need to, replace Tanev, I guess, but yeah, they need to fill out this roster a little more so that one injury doesn't truly sink the team. Because yeah, you look at what the pairings kind of look like without Tanev, and it's a little ugly, like it's okay. Are you gonna put Riley and McCabe together? You're going to flip McCabe to the right side and then put McCabe and OEL together like they were earlier in the season, put Myers back with Riley. It just, it just doesn't look right, like it really doesn't. So it'd be nice if they can find somebody else to fill in a void here. And they need it regardless, whether it's a Luke Shen, whether it's, a David Savard, or possibly, Dave, what about a Seth Jones? It's a little big buck hunting, but Seth Jones is a guy whose name is floating around in the trade market, on the trade sphere. On the other side, Dave, why don't we get into what's going on with Seth Jones, the bombshell comments he made after Chicago's loss the other night, and maybe what it would take for the Maple Leafs to entertain an offer for Seth Jones. That's all coming up next here in the Locked On Leafs podcast.
Today's edition of Locked On Leafs podcast is brought to you a new sponsor, actually, and it's Trade Coffee. If you're like me, your mornings have to start with a good cup of coffee, or like myself, a nice espresso. But I got tired of settling for grocery store brands that just weren't cutting it. That's why I turned to Trade. And let me tell you, this coffee is next level. Trade is the #1 specialty coffee marketplace in the U.S., bringing you fresh coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Their experts have tasted thousands of coffees, curating over 450 amazing roasts. Whether you're new to coffee or know exactly what you like, they'll handpick the perfect match for you. And that's exactly what I did. I went through their it takes a couple of seconds and you'll find yourself the exact one you are looking for. And it didn't take long for me to get my coffee either. I took the quiz, set it up, and it came right to my door. And the subscription makes it so easy. No more last-minute grocery store runs or selling for whatever is on the shelf. And if you don't love your first bag, no worries. Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our listeners 40% off your first order at drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL. That's drinktrade.com/LockedOnNHL for 40% off your first order. Go and get that coffee.
Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. Mike DiStefano and David Morassutti with you as we are each and every weekday, Monday through Friday, with brand new episodes of the podcast, which are free and available wherever we get a podcast and also up on YouTube as well. We'd ask that if you haven't already, please subscribe to the podcast, subscribe to the channel. That'd be greatly appreciated. We're on our road to 10K. Once we hit 10,000 subscribers on YouTube, we will be giving away another Maple Leafs jersey. So sub up quick, be a friend, tell a friend, join the Locked On Leafs family. All right, Dave. So with the trade deadline coming up, there's a lot of names that are being added to trade bait boards over the last couple of weeks here, and all the new ones are coming out now with a week to go until the deadline, 9 days to be exact, 8 days, and a name that has rocketed up near the top on a lot of these trade bait boards is Seth Jones of the Chicago Blackhawks. And Seth Jones, once upon a time, great young up-and-coming puck-moving defenseman. He was terrific when he was with Nashville, great with Columbus, got dealt to Chicago. And it's been a bit of an up-and-down season, up-and-down career for him since he got there. It's not a very good team, obviously. They've been basement dwellers the last few seasons. And it seems like things are getting to a boiling point also with Seth Jones. Now, the Chicago Blackhawks, for those who are unaware of what happened on, was it Tuesday night? They're playing the Utah, I was going to say the Utah Jazz, but no, the Utah Hockey Club, and they lost 2-1. Seems like a respectable score, respectable game. Must have been pretty tight, no, Dave? Good, tight, low-scoring hockey game?
Sound like it.
Yeah, except it really wasn't. The shot attempts in that game, Dave, what were they?
I'm going to assume very heavily favoring the Utah Hockey Club.
Yeah. The shot attempts in that game was 93-39. 93-39 were the shot attempts for the Utah Hockey Club over the Chicago Blackhawks. And Utah's not even that good of a freaking team. Let's be honest. They're not even a playoff team. Was that in Chicago too, or was that in Utah?
In Utah.
All right, at least it was in Utah, so it wasn't in front of the fans at the United Center. But yeah, so it's not been a good year for them. They're back down in the basement. They stink. And over the Four Nations break, Seth Jones really became a big talking point in the trade sphere. And so people keep asking him his thoughts on the season and where he's at with things with Chicago. Can we play the audio from last night's game the other day against Utah? Because this was quite the pipe bomb that Seth Jones unleashed post-loss to the Utah Hockey Club when their team got absolutely embarrassed.
What needs to change for this ever to, I guess, to right itself?
I don't know. I think we're the exact same team right now as we were at game one. And I think it's pretty evident out there. We haven't made any strides to be a better, more simple hockey team, and it shows, we don't get a lot of wins because of that.
This is kind of an opportunity to gauge that since you started here and now 60 games and almost you're back here again.
Well, this is in almost 4 years of, bottom of the league. So it's not just this year for me, at least.
Is it also hard, 5 penalties, to stay on the ice?
It doesn't help. But like I said, it puts a ton of pressure on Sodi. It just kills momentum. We if you have 1 or 2 good shifts in a row and then you take a penalty, we have 3 in the first, 2 in the second. I don't know if we have 1 in the third. 10 minutes is a long time on the kill. You don't get the flow of the guys going offensively. Now guys have to sit, and then it's tough to get anything going. So definitely staying out of the box is key. But I'll say it again. Sodi was unbelievable. We have 0 chance of winning if he didn't stand on his head.
Well, they win anyways. They lost the hockey game, but pretty damning comments from Seth Jones that saying how they haven't grown from game 1 to game 60. They're the same team that's making the same mistakes, and they just can't play simple hockey. And that sounds like a guy who wants out, if I've ever heard.
Yeah, we know that he's asked out. He seems to be a bit checked out when you kind of hear his comments too. It hasn't been going well in Chicago. And he's part of the problem, right? It hasn't exactly been part of the solution there. I know the rest of the team is just not very good. I get that. You can't just all put it on him, but it's not a good situation for him. And I'm trying to think if it reminds if there's been ever a similar situation where a player had a really bad contract in terms of the cap hit, right? And
tons. There's a lot of contracts that have been horrible and that were deemed untradeable, and
Yeah.
I mean, the list kind of goes on. Like Ryan Johansson had a bad contract for a while. I mean,
Yeah, that's a good like when Duchesne had that deal
yeah,
in.
Duchesne's his deal. Tyler Seguin's contract is pretty gross out there, and yeah, there's a lot. I mean, the Leafs have been saddled with some deals. Like that Clarkson contract was bad for a little bit, right? Until they found a way to move on from that. Like there's been a lot of contracts that have been bad. The thing is, teams are figuring out ways to move out these bad deals. And I think that it's possible that a team could still want to bring in a Seth Jones. Like I think there's still a little bit of lore when it comes to Seth Jones, and someone could want to potentially give him an opportunity. Like he's got 3 more years left on his contract after this at $9.5 million. So it is quite the hefty contract. And for a guy who's got 27 points this year, he hasn't had a 50-point season since 2021, 22. Like the last 3 years, the numbers have been declining. And you're looking at like -38, -37, -16. Like it really isn't good. And even last night's game, Seth Jones, he talked about the shot attempts. He played a team high 1646 at 5-on-5. I'm curious what it was all around, actually. 25-27. So 25 and a half minutes of ice time for Seth Jones last night. And he was outchanced and outshot, 30? Gave up 30 shot attempts when he was out there on the ice, a 33% expected goals. Like he's just not playing well enough himself is another issue also.
No, he's being that cap is at $9.5 million. More than Cale Makar, by the way. Probably I'm looking at
him and Darnell Nurse both signed those deals. And
I was about to say, like, Darnell Nurse is probably the only other defenseman I looked at that probably has a worse contract than Seth Jones, because we've talked about Edmonton literally trying to figure out how they can get rid of that deal, and they just can't. There's just not no way to really salvage that.
Today's episode is also brought to you by FanDuel. When the game faces off, the NHL action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening faceoff or you want to bet on a third-period comeback, you can stay in on the action, and if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature. It allows me to keep every moment exciting, whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking a player to score a goal. I never feel like I miss my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sportsbook partner of the Locked On Network. Let me ask you this, Dave. Let me ask you this. So it's at $9.5 million, right? And a way that we've seen teams get rid of players and get rid of contracts is by retaining salary and eating money and making it more digestible for the team, taking on those problem deals.
Yeah.
What would the number have to be, you think, for a team to be comfortable? Like, let's say it's even the Maple Leafs, because we talked about a lot. What does this team need? They need a right shot defenseman to partner up with Morgan Riley. Seth Jones could fit the bill. Seth Jones could fit the bill in this, or potentially you go like McCabe and Jones, and then Riley and Tanev can play together. However you want to shake it, he is a bona fide top 4 defenseman in the league. At $9.5 million, absolutely not. But how much would they need to retain to make it interesting for you and make it interesting for the Leafs, you think?
For me, if I was to even consider it, I need that number to come below 7. That cap has got to be below 7, because then right shot defenseman top 6 makes a little more sense. He's also some people are also talking about his play and all this stuff. He's not old. he's still under 30. I mean, that's what people need to also understand. He's approaching 30. Like, he's still got some. He's playing a lot of minutes. It's not like he's taking a sheltered role. Like, Chicago is getting their money. They're paying him. They're getting their money's worth out of him, right? Sorry, he's 30. So, that's something you have to consider is you're paying him until he's 30. Sorry, I think he would be. What you said, 3 more years left on the 4
Yeah,
years left. Like
3 more years after this.
So you're paying a guy into his into his late 30s. So that's something you do have to consider. That means you're like pretty much locking in your blue line at this rate of Riley, Tanev, McCabe, and then Jones. Like, that's your top 4, right? And so I do think, like, and here's the other thing, the kicker on this is he has a no movement clause. So as much as
if he's asking out, though, if he's asking out,
but he's not going to just agree to go to another team in a similar situation that Chicago's in.
Yeah,
right?
well, we're talking about the Leafs, though. Like, we're talking about
Toronto. For the Leafs, I guarantee he would waive his no movement clause.
So he just for numbers purposes, if the Blackhawks retain 30% of that deal, it would be $2.85 million, which would bring that cap hit down to $6.65 million. That's doable for you?
That's a lot more digestible than $9.5 million. Like, think of like what the Penguins did when they got Karlsson. Now, obviously, Erik Karlsson is a bit older, but Erik Karlsson was also coming off of Norris, right? Like, that's a similar situation where it's like the Leafs are not exactly flush with cap space. They can pay they can afford to pay Seth Jones. They just don't have the cap maneuverability. And the good thing for Chicago. Yes, this season they have used 2 of their retained salaries, one for the Mikko Rantanen deal. Still think that was asinine considering what they got back to do that, and the Jake McCabe. But this is the last year that they're retaining on McCabe, and obviously Rantanen's done after this year. So they're going to be pretty much resetting their retained salaries so they can afford to do it on a Seth Jones if it means that they'll at least get something more worthwhile. And I think I heard, I can't remember which insider said it, but also Chicago's probably going to not want picks. They're going to probably want some players back.
That's the thing. It's like, I don't know how much value he has just because he's making so much money. Like, the cap hit, getting rid of that cap hit and getting rid of a player who seemingly doesn't want to be there is kind of where I think most of the value lies for Chicago. Unfortunately, like, it's a diminishing asset is what they have. Like, that's kind of where we're at right now. That's what it is. And it's similarly to how, you brought up Taylor Hall. That's kind of how they end up treating Taylor Hall. It's like, we're just going to get rid of you. Like, we just want to get rid of your cap and get rid of your number. And that's kind of what ended up happening. They got nothing for him. Could possibly see a similar situation if a team's willing to bring on, as much cap as possible. I think the Leafs they'd ask for a little more retention. But
that's probably where Chicago hopes they can get a little more back, is if they retain.
Well, the more you retain, the more you're going to get.
Yeah,
that I will say. The more you retain, the more that you are going to get. And, we talk about a guy like Nick Robertson. I mean, that's a young team that could use some goal scorers, and I'm sure there'd be interest there. Like a Fraser Minton, they probably would have interest. Not that I'm willing to give up all of these players for Seth Jones in that contract, but, there's some decent guys that I'm sure they would be interested in. But yeah, it's Seth Jones is an interesting name that has kind of popped up the last couple of weeks. And I don't know if he's at the top of my list when I look at, defensemen for the Maple Leafs to bring in, but it is an interesting one. It's a high profile one. I still would prefer, honestly, a much cheaper option in Luke Schenn.
I was about to say, I was waiting for you to bring up this name because Luke Schenn had similar comments after the Predators lost against the Predators. Okay, the Predators lost against Florida.
Yeah.
I don't think I've ever been a part of a group like this that literally can't score a goal. Hey, Luke, you left Toronto to go to Nashville. You were a part of the team that
Which is
couldn't score.
insane. You know how much money they spent on goal scorers this year? Like bringing in Stamkos, bringing in Marchessault, brought in Brady Shea. Was there one other? I think there was another addition they made also to try and improve their goal scoring this year. And it just has not worked. It has not worked at all for the Nashville Predators, which is again why a guy like Luke Shen is also available. Sounds like the Leafs are also in on his brother Braden, possibly bring the Shen brothers to Toronto. That would be a stellar deadline for Tree Living. If he could bring the Shen brothers into Toronto together, that would be an A-grade deadline for the Leafs. If he
It
can
would
make
hit the
that.
fields in a lot of ways, right? The guy that the Leafs wanted to draft missed out because the LA Kings grabbed him a couple of picks before. Brian Burke was salty at the draft table. Then he sells Ottawa. Oh, you want Nazem Kadri? Too bad. We're taking Nazem Kadri.
Yeah, we're taking him. Okay. I love that clip.
I think Dreger talked about Braden Shen as like they want that. So
Shannon Lawton, they're interested in both Braden Shen and Scott Lawton. So when they start talking in depth like that, these insiders usually the Leafs will probably end up with one of them. And one's going to be more expensive than the other, I would imagine. Braden will be more expensive than Scott Lawton, but if they can bring in both Shen brothers, I think that'd be pretty sweet. I would think, that would be a nice little deal and a nice deadline for the Buds to kind of lengthen the lineup a little bit. But yeah, so that's that when it comes to Seth Jones and the Maple Leafs and what might be happening in the coming days here as the NHL trade deadline quickly approaches. Next Friday, 3 p.m. is the deadline. I think coming up next week, we'll start putting together a list of top targets for the Maple Leafs. I think tomorrow too. Let's do a power rank, a little Friday power rank. We'll power rank our. We'll take a look at maybe the Leafs' top 5 tradable assets potentially. I think we could do that on tomorrow's show.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. All right. Let's lock that in. All right, that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to the Locked On Leafs podcast on all platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck. Follow Dave at D_Morassutti and follow the show as well at Locked On Leafs. We'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow, but until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.